Welcome to today's Board of Directors agenda meeting for August 27, 2019. This is our opportunity to review the agenda for our former board meeting that will be held on September 3rd, 2019. Today, we will now hear from an update from Canvas Community Church regarding the Bridge to Work pilot program.
Mayor, directors, city manager, staff, everybody, we appreciate y'all letting us share the exciting things that are going on with this project. As you know, the vision for this was to engage people who are homeless or panhandling in some meaningful work and connect them to resources that will help them get to their next step and get fully employed, if that is their next step, whatever fits them. And so we go over the basics of this. I want to introduce our staff. We have two of our drivers and team leaders. They're out there on the ground around the city with everybody. Alex Williams, wave there. Felicia Cooks, our lead pastor, Gail Brooks, our life coach, Ron Barra, and we got some folks from Jericho Way, Dot Robbins. We're forming these alliances and connections across the city to support people as we go through this project. The big goals for this would be to beautify the city. If we could flip to the next slide there, that would be, there we go, beautify the city, make the city look better, and make our people feel better as they help clean the city up. You go through and you see a dirty street, you go clean it up, I did something. And so they look better and they feel better. And regarding our people, we want to work with them on their next step. There are a lot of barriers that our people experience to go from homelessness and panhandling to full-time work. There's a lot of steps in between, but we want them to drive that process. So we want to identify their next step and work with them to accomplish it. And to do that, we need to create that community of support that a lot of us had growing up with parents and teachers and pastors and community leaders and neighbors that a lot of people are missing. So we got to create that support to get people to their next step. So looking at the map, this is one that one of the staff put together of where we've worked throughout the city. And the red is the streets that we've worked on and cleaned. The green dots are the spots where we have engaged people. There are a lot downtown. There's one at Canvas, there's one at Jericho Way, but there's one in almost every ward, and we've worked in every ward. We've tried our best to have as broad a reach as possible, and our assignments have come from the city's 311 complaints. And so that's kind of gives you the picture visually of our reach of this project. The statistics we got, total sites that we have cleaned. Now some of these are duplicates because they're frequent spots where people like to empty their cars. So we get to clean them 2 or 3 times every couple months. But we've cleaned a total of 130 sites as of last week, logged 1,821 hours, removed 2,056 bags of trash from the streets of Little Rock. And we have assisted Public Works in responding to every single citizen complaint in a timely fashion since we started. They've missed 0 deadlines, and we've even gone a step further. They've sent us out on places proactively before somebody has time to pick up the phone and call 311 and complain. To look at the numbers of our people that we've been working with, the demographics, including folks that have started returning. There's about 380 unique individuals, but 456 folks have worked with us. 72% black, 26% white, almost 1% Latino, and that one person that was Native American, his percentage is getting smaller as we go along, but that's just how it pans out, how it shakes out. We've offered work to 158 panhandlers, and 44 of them have accepted our offer and worked with us. So I would think that this is almost as difficult as hitting a major league fastball. So a batting average of 279 is good. I mean, that's hopefully improving the morale of folks. A lot of people are starting to come to us because we've spread the word, passed out flyers. So they're coming to us at Canvas to try to engage at work instead of waiting for us to find them. Now, a picture, of course, is worth 1,000 words. So this is Crystal Valley Road. which is one of the ones we get to see more than once, unfortunately. But this is before we showed up, and then after we got there and did our work, there it is, all bagged up, ready for Public Works to pick up. As far as our people, though, the impact we're having on them, this set of things that they've experienced and done shows some of the barriers that people have had to deal with, and the things that they need to work on in order to get to that spot where they can be fully employed. 45 of the folks have actively engaged with the service providers. Now, there may be more than that because they come and work with us and then they go away and they start working on things on their own. And so I don't always know exactly who's engaged in these things. But we've referred 13 folks for mental health, counseling, psychiatrists. 3 have connected with physical health. 6 folks that we've gotten them into addiction treatment. And as people want to do that, we're constantly trying to get them connected, because I know that no matter how talented they are, if they've got that addiction problem, their job is not going to last very long. Several folks show up and they say, man, we just got stranded here and we want to get back home where we've got jobs and support. So we've sent 11 people home. They use their wages they earn and some money that we cobbled together from different sources, donations outside of the grant, to get them back home. Identification documents, birth certificates and IDs. I could have a job opportunity for somebody, but if they don't have that ID, they can't get hired. So we help get that done. We've gotten 31 people health insurance so they can stay healthy, get to work, stay at work. The bus pass system that the city has worked out with the Homeless Coalition, we've assisted, as of today, we've got 15 people on the bus pass. 6 folks that I know of have gotten into temporary housing, 1 into permanent housing. We've helped folks complete 23 job applications with the city or the Department of Transportation or another organization where we can go online and help them do that. Gotten about 20 people-ish interviews. 3 have gotten part-time work that I know of, and I think this number is 13 plus if those 6 that were offered work with a new city grant last Friday, doing flood cleanup, and the 6 alternates, if they get work, then that would nearly double that full-time work number. So that's where we are on the numbers, but to put a face to folks and to stories, let me tell you the story about Jesse. He couldn't be here because he's got to get checked in to the Compassion Center right about now. But he's got a rocky relationship with his family. He's had bad health issues, been in and out of the hospital since April when we met him. But Ron Barrett connected with him and stayed in touch. And Ron's visited him in the hospital twice. That's one of the reasons they start calling him Pastor Ron. Anyway, they ordained him anyway. But he made that connection, and that is what has helped Jesse keep going, so that when he's now healthy and he's going to be going to work for Enterprise detailing cars. Benny, which we ran into Benny just now today at lunch. We were out on Chenal. We were at Highland Valley United Methodist Church eating lunch. And he pulls in an Our House Restore van. And the last time I had contact with him, he was scared to get a job doing machining because he didn't know if he had gas to get from the shelter to the job until that first paycheck. And I said, Benny, go get the job. We'll put gas in your car until you get to that first paycheck. So he went back, he got the job, he got the gas, and then the job fell through. The grant or the funding for that contract, it didn't work out, but then he found this job at Our House, and he's been working there, saving his money, doing the Our House program for about 2 months now. Now, lest you think I'm just going to pick and choose the nicest, neatest stories to tell you, I want to tell you the story about James. James has an addiction, and James has problems with his probation officer in that he hasn't visited his probation officer. And he has a warrant out. He's had both of these clouds hanging over his head. It keeps him from getting or even really seriously looking for full-time work. So Thursday, he will be in front of the judge. I will be with him. His recovery pastor from another church will be with him as well, I hope. And hopefully that judge will put him back on probation. He's only had this one probation violation. So that judge's general practice is to put them back on probation. But once he gets back on probation, then his plan is to get right to rehab. And then he will, move through those steps to be fully prepared to engage in the job search and get it. Then to put an actual face to the thing, I want to talk to you about Joe. Joe has, we visited with him early on in the process, and we were wondering why he was homeless, because he didn't have any legal problems, he doesn't have any physical problems, he doesn't have an addiction. He had a driver's license, and he even had a commercial driver's license. That's like the gold standard for getting a job with the city or the Department of Transportation. And so we just sat down after work, and we went to the Little Rock City job site, and we plugged in all the details of his, pieced together his work history and plugged it all in there, made a call, and said, would you please just give Joe an interview? And they did, and he showed them what he had, and there he is. He's working for the city. He got to go back to Jericho Way, this time not as a client, but as a worker doing some work for the city, and they're driving his dump truck, which is the next slide there. It's not that exciting, but that's his job, and he's doing it. So we're super excited about what has gone on, and we hope to be able to keep the momentum going and keep forming these relationships and developing volunteers to walk with people like Ron, the way Ron walked with people. That's not rocket surgery. It's just caring for people one-on-one, and that's the heavy lifting that has to be done in order to get people moving through these big hurdles to their future, where they can be productive citizens and pay taxes, all that good stuff. Do y'all have any questions?
Director Peck? You took it off.
I'm on.
There you
Oh,
are.
goodness. I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. Paul, I heard the report. I apologize for being a little bit late, but I heard it before. I just want to thank you and Gail, everybody at Canvas, Pastor Ron. I'm telling the rabbi that you're going to tell the rabbi on you. Dot, everyone who's been involved in this. This has been such a win-win. I think we've touched all the wards. We've done a great job cleaning up the city, and we've made a difference in so many people's lives. And I just really, with all my heart, want to thank you and your team for the work you've done.
Thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes, on that first or second slide you showed, there was like 158, but only 40-something that accepted the jobs. What
Yes.
are the reason that the others are not doing it?
It's really hard to tell. Maybe we're not paying enough that they can stand at the street corner and get enough money handed to them that way. Could be that they don't, as engaging and trustworthy as Alex and Felicia are, they may just not know them. And so, I know the van has a City of Little Rock sign on it, but maybe those two are wild, crazy terrorists. They're going to take them off into someplace. So there's a trust factor maybe. And it just, I don't know, changing the way you do your routine is difficult and scary sometimes. So we'll just keep plugging
Which
away.
area of Little Rock are you getting the best response? Southwest or John Barrow area? I noticed that there's quite a few.
I would say, and Felicia and Alex chime in, probably Southwest is probably where we get the most engagement. Along the 630 corridor is probably not as good. We have engaged to some folks at Shackelford Crossing. Now, some of them would tell us that they were doing just fine the way they were. They weren't going to change anything about their lives, but they weren't harassing the guests that day while they were picking up trash with us. But so that would be my answer. It's really hard to say.
Are all of your bags black?
Yes.
I do notice some white bags and some black bags, so I was trying to figure out who was picking up which color are
I
bags?
think the white bags are just people that have dumped stuff out on the side of the road and they didn't know that we had these trash cans that you can put them in and the city will pick them up for you.
Okay. But
Just-
thank you very
you're
much for
welcome.
what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Paul, and thank all of you for what you've been doing. And, you know, we've been pretty good about thanking everybody who's been so instrumental in this, but one person I think that deserves more credit than he's gotten, and that's the city manager, because when we called him and had an opportunity to bring Alan Armillo here from Albuquerque, it took Bruce about a half a second to say yes. And that visit was what led to this, and it took Skip about a half a second to say yes to the Clinton School, and so to Bruce, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, Director Webb. Director Hines.
Again, I wanted to share something I shared with Kathy earlier this week that I don't know if it's anecdotal or I'm going to err on the side that your program's working. I know that I've not had as many complaints out at Markham and Bowman from panhandlers, and it seems like they're not hanging out in the area like they used to. So we appreciate it, and I look forward to hopefully supporting this going forward.
We'll keep working at it.
Well, Paul, and the entire Canvas Community Church family, all those that are involved with this process, I too not only want to share, I know this is a project that was really underway from a long period of time before I was able to come into office, and spearheaded from a lot of your ideas, but working directly with Directors Webb and Peck. So I want to share my appreciation to those two servant leaders that really kind of helped with this process, along with yourself, in addition to our Chief Administrative Officer and Mr. Bruce Moore and what he's been doing to get it to this point. One of the things that Mr. Moore and I shared and been visiting with our city attorney, we're going to be extending the contract and working through that process for the next year so we can truly show a true pilot from that perspective. And so I guess it'll go from, I believe it's October of this year to September next year. So that way you get a chance to look at the fall season and really see how it works as well within the winter as well.
Yeah.
And so just kudos to you all, what you all have been doing. This is truly servant's work and ministry. And grateful for the ministry of work through the Canvas Community Church that's not only building up lives, it's building our community and truly uniting our community. And I just want to share our appreciation on behalf of the city. Just want to give you all a round of applause.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Moore, would you like to share anything since you were integral in this back in 2018?
Mayor, members of the board, I'd just echo Director Webb and Director Peck and the whole team. It really is a team. I want to compliment John and his team in Public Works. It's a pretty coordinated approach so they know where to go, where the complaints are, and so I think I saw John. Oh, he's usually back there. But no, a great team effort, and I'm very appreciative, as the mayor said, to the Canvas community and the whole team. So thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Paul. We'll continue on with our agenda, but again, we're grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
For tonight, we have several modifications, as you'll see in M1 and M2. M1 is a resolution for the contract to complete street improvements on Polk Street. And item M2 is a resolution for disbursement of funds to the Arkansas Livestock Show Association for capital improvements. Do I have a motion to add items M1 and 2? There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Motion passes. Items M1 and 2 have been added to the agenda. We'll now, yes, ma'am.
Item 2, I know that when we passed the tax that they was to get a certain amount of money. Is this part of that money? Is this in addition to that money? And have we had any type of report of how that money was spent?
Director Adcock, this is part of their allocation out of the 3/8 cent, and we can have the executive director come next Tuesday and sort of give an overview of not only what they've spent, but their overall goals going forward.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. We now can proceed with the consent agenda for items 1 through 7. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move
I'm
forward.
good with this.
Board members, are there any questions regarding items 8 through 13? Seeing none, I will move now to the public hearing that we'll have for item number 14. Are there any questions regarding item number 14? Seeing none, I now ask for a motion to adjourn the agenda. You have a question on 14? Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I would like to know how the denial and then staff approves it. Could we have a report on this, please?
Yes, Mr. Collins.
Mr. Collins, it looks like that staff approved this, and then the planning commission had a denial.
Yes, ma'am. The denial was based upon that did not reach the required 6 votes for approval. There were several that was not in attendance of that planning commission, so the votes, I believe, when we get down to it, was 5 that were for the vote, 3 noes, and 3 were absent.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Director Hines.
Yes, also Director Adcock, after the Planning Commission, the neighborhood and the developers sat down and came up with some compromises, and we had a letter of support from the neighborhood's attorney last week. That's what you had in your thing. So I think they've worked out, the neighborhood's comfortable with the development now, and I don't think we're going to see any opposition that I'm aware of.
And I have received today confirmation from the owner that they have agreed to those terms and conditions as presented to the board.
Director Wright.
Were there any concerns about ordinance 9 and 10 changing from 03 to general commercial?
Are you at a staff level or just the general public? There was nobody in opposition that come to the planning commission for those items.
Okay,
You know,
well,
for there.
These are pretty much in office parks, so
Yeah, and.
there are no
and
houses too much around.
Those items, item 9 it's been zoned, it changed. Now, the item 9 was C2 to C3. That's that property that's just a little west of Shackelford. So it's one of those vacant properties that's been wooded and just hasn't developed over the years. We're seeing a lot of movement in the area down Canis due to the fact that the improvements along Canis are happening. So now some of those properties that have sat undeveloped is starting to come before us
Okay,
to either get rezoned that's been setting or develop plans submitted.
and there might not any residential over there, so that
No.
shouldn't be an impact on anybody. Okay.
There's not.
And then at Centerview.
Well, there is across the street, but the residential has been existing on the south side.
Yeah.
That's been part of that development that's come through there,
Yeah,
portion of it.
so, I mean, they know
And
where they are.
nobody showed up in opposition,
Okay.
for those properties.
Okay. And so all of that is pretty much the same. 11 is a part of that too.
11 is further down. That's at the intersection, I believe, is that the one that's at the intersection of Centerview?
Yeah,
Yes. It's all going down there and improving, and that's that southwest corner. That's set vacant for a while. That was office, and when we zoned that property, the intent was that corridor to be more of the hospital or the medical uses down through that area. That has really shifted more to the executive center aspect of it. And so it's not uncommon now for this one, for them to relook at it, maybe commercial for that corner and that area. And it is also going commercial on the north side of that, on the planned development.
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much. Seeing no other questions, now a motion to adjourn our agenda meeting. There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Meeting adjourned. Started the inaugural policy discussion. That inaugural policy discussion was conducted by and led by John Honeywell, who's the director of our public works, as he took a lot of time and attention. No, John, you're not asked. I'm not asking you to come up. I'm just giving you kudos. John and his team took the time during the inaugural policy discussion to discuss the solid waste fund rate proposal with our consultants, and so we spent a good hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, going through that process and sharing that we have not had an increase in our rates since the early 2000s, and that the need of the work that we're currently doing to sustain that and to increase more work and what it would take for that. And so sometime, I believe, Bruce, I believe September the 17th is the date that we will bring the solid waste study for a vote, and that was the reason why we had a very extensive discussion about that. I would encourage, if any board members, to make certain that we traditionally have meetings to, as we move to have productive and effective meetings, that we spent a couple hours on the solid waste study and asked a lot of questions during that particular meeting. One of the things that came out of it, when we pass that ordinance, if we pass that ordinance, that one, it would not go into effect until January 1. And then secondly, due to the understanding that there is a desire to look into glass recycling, that if we do increase our solid waste rates, that we would need to focus on the RFQ, which is already underway, building that RFQ underway for glass recycling, and that if whenever we were able to make a decision, decide to make a decision on including that, it will be sometime this fall. So all rates, if they are to increase, would increase on January 1 at one time. I think that was some very good feedback from the City Board of Directors. So that was our inaugural policy discussion. Before I go forward, is there any questions before I start with our second policy discussion? Director Adcock, looks like you might have a question.
Several of us had several questions about that, and we was told that we would discuss we could ask our questions when we was talking about the budget. So those questions that we had that we did not ask that evening, when are we going to be able to ask those questions?
I'm glad you asked, because many of those questions that you were asking were not related to the solid waste study and its rates. They were related to budgetary items, and so those questions will be discussed during the budget process. And so today, being our second policy discussion, we're going to discuss, as it shows today, the 2020 budget preparation. So I'm going to, once you allow me, I'll get ready to get started on that second discussion.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. So, that being said, one of the things that we have a goal is to start early as it relates to the 2020 budget. We want to start early as we continue to be the chief stewards of our city's resources as we build the 2020 budget this fall. And so part of starting early, we want to share a goal. I know generally some feedback that I've shared that the board would like to be a little bit more involvement into the budgetary process in regards to Q&A and things of that nature. And we also discussed that there has to be a greater need for community involvement as well as we build the budget. As you know, this will be a co-prepared budget between myself and the Chief Administrative Officer as we prepare this 2020 budget for the City Board to pass to move forward with our resources for 2020. As we start early, I know generally we start, generally you all have started sometime in October or November, so we want to really start the processes in September. And so as we begin this preparation, the reason is to finish, and hopefully, the goal is to pass the budget by November. So we can all kind of move our eyes towards 2020 in the month of December moving forward. That's our goal. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, but that is our goal, and that's the reason why we want to start early as it relates to the budget. So after we move from that budget process, we want to make certain the initial, on our third policy discussion on September the 10th, we will have a initial I want to stress initial, budgetary presentation by our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Sarah Linehan. And so part of that process, she's going to share past, present, and future. How did we get here? And in regards to previous budget years, where we are today, and where we are today will go into effect, and focusing on, we're now coming up on the last few days of the end of quarter 3 for 2019. So she'll go through a process of sharing the financials of as best as possible for quarter 1, 2. We just received our numbers for June, so depending on where she is on that, that'll be shared, but we'll definitely go through the first 2 quarters and try our best with the initial information that we have, go through quarter 3 as well on September the 10th as we build through that. So again, September the 10th is going to be focused on past, present, and future in regards to that. And then secondly, after we have that type of discussion, we're going to be focused on the 2020 budget year, our priorities, and the priorities are going to be based on our aspirational goals. What do we aspire as a city versus our necessity? And so we'll be focused and hopefully find a balance in being fiscally prudent to dream big, think big, and execute in a big way, but in a fiscally prudent way, in a way as we move forward. So that's the general nature. Many things that are going to be overarching things that we have to consider in this budgetary process, whether it's for this year or future years, is one, we understand that we have a verbal agreement with the Pulaski County judge, and when I say we, the respective cities of Pulaski County, to increase our jail funding, to extend our current contract for a year with an increase of 25% for our jail funding for the city of Little Rock. That represents somewhere around $500,000 that we have to plug in for the 2020 budget year. The initial tag was somewhere double of the $1.9 million that we currently expend, and so we are relieved that it's just $500,000. But we do have to plan for 2021, understanding there will be a significant increase. But we want to verify, determine, and set those standards with the independent auditor that the respective cities of Pulaski County and the county judge will select to review, determine, set the new jail daily rate going forward that would go in effect hopefully in 2021. But for 2020, it'll be that 25%. So that's the overarching thing that we also have to focus on for 2020 as well as 2021. Secondly, health insurance. Health insurance is a big deal and drives a lot to our budget because our most precious asset in the city of Little Rock are our employees. They are our human capital and our human talent. And so we do provide health care at a very generous rate to our city employees, and we want to maintain that. But we also understand that premiums are getting high, and so currently right now our Chief People Officer, Stacy Weatherell, is leading up some new processes in regards to how we look at health insurance, and so she'll have more information to present to us soon, and then we'll have a policy discussion about that as well. So just want to keep that on the horizon. But one of the things that we do know is that we have to focus and have a laser focus on preventative measures and public health outcomes because we're starting to see a small number of our most precious assets drive premiums, and so which helps us understand that we have to have a greater focus on prevention. Moving from jail, moving from health insurance, with always one of the things too Sarah's going to be working on is how do we look at different processes that we have right now within the city. I think we all shared during the budget amendment process that we will be bringing on a auditing firm to look at the performance of our programs to figure out are we getting the return on our investment. And many times within government, it may not be necessarily the return on investment, but if we're investing our resources, what is the effectiveness of the resource that we're using to create some quality. And so that process has already begun, and that'll help drive to the building. We've actually already had some meetings today about that with that particular firm, and so those processes will help drive our budgetary decisions as well. That's kind of an overarching theme for the 2020 preparation. And now, unless there's any questions, we'll now bring up our Chief Financial Officer and Sarah Linehan to just give a few more tidbits. I think I wanted to cover as much as possible so you wouldn't have to be up there as long.
So the mayor did hit most of my highlights. I am planning on September 10th, as he said, to come in. It will be a presentation of our results through the end of the second quarter. As he mentioned, we just got our June sales tax results last Friday, and I believe those were distributed to you yesterday. In addition, staff has begun to start gathering information from departments. We're just beginning to do that. As the mayor said, we're kind of dividing it into the aspirational goals versus necessities. We're reviewing all of the contracts that we have. We do not plan to hold the traditional program inventory sessions that we've had in the past, but we do plan to engage the public fairly regularly with meetings. The mayor has asked me to try to get some meetings set up for the end of September, 1st of October. We plan to have some of those. We're looking at Center at University Park, Southwest Community Center, West Central Community Center for some public engagement opportunities as we're discussing the budget. We are currently in the process of implementing a budget module that we've been attempting to implement over the last year that is developed by Infor/Lawson, our financial management software. We will not be able to utilize that yet for the 2020 budget. It's still in the planning and development stage of implementation. So preparation of the budget is still a pretty detailed manual process. IT has begun or is beginning to pull all of the personnel information for us from our human resources information, from our payroll information. As the mayor said, our human resources division is bidding out health insurance. We're looking at a multitude of options there. We're gathering the pension rates, contribution rates for the various plans and other benefit information. Personnel being the largest part of our budget, that's one of the pieces. It takes a lot of time to pull that together, to incorporate all the step and grade schedules that are included in our police agreement, fire agreement, AFSCME agreements, to get that as accurate as possible, as to understand what that base level of expense is. The Treasury Manager is already reaching out, trying to evaluate our current revenue trends, which, as the mayor mentioned, we just have results through June at this point. But also reaching out to our utility companies for franchise fee guidance. We work with the county on developing the assumptions for the property tax, and with the state and with our historical information on the sales tax results. As the mayor also mentioned at our last agenda meeting, you all had a discussion on the waste disposal rate study, and so that is something that will be incorporated into development of the budget as well. That ordinance, he said, would be coming forward in September, and then based on the action that the board takes, that will be incorporated in that discussion. We're also currently evaluating our fixed expenditures, such as debt service, outstanding debt service on notes that we already have. We closed on our 2019 short-term financing note just last week, which is providing funding for the computer-aided dispatch system, some police and fire radios, the first set of turnout gear, or the first round of the second set of turnout gear for our fire, and some enhancement in Fire Station 12, some additional bedrooms and all, but that will add some debt service to the 2020 budget. And we're looking at all of our interlocal agreements. The mayor mentioned the jail funding, so that will be incorporated. I've already got a budget session set up with Rock Region Metro. They're working on developing their budget. Executive Director of Rock Region Metro made a presentation last week to you all. And then our grants manager is also gathering information on potential grant match needs for next year. And as the mayor mentioned, Emily Cox is coordinating and facilitating with the outside consultant on a review of our programs. As he said, our goal is to try and adopt a budget by the end of November. It's aggressive. I'm hoping that we can make it. We can do it. But that's kind of where we stand. As I mentioned, we're in the planning stages. As we gather this information and do our revenue forecasting, then we always compare the expenditure side of the equation to the revenue side of the equation, and make adjustments as necessary then to make sure that comes into balance. So that's where we stand, and look forward to engaging the public and getting your input and moving forward.
And thank you. Just one other thing to add before we go to questions is one component that we feel that be a part of the budgeting process is looking at is how we discussed the body-worn cameras. We do have a grant out to the U.S. Department of Justice to help fund our body-worn cameras for our Little Rock Police Department. We hope to have information about that sometime in October.
That's correct, October.
Director Hines, thank you so much, Sarah.
You have a question for me?
We'll keep Sarah just in case. Director Hines.
Thank you. Sarah, so, one of the issues I've had with our previous budgeting processes is that we have fallen into the trap of using revenue growth projections that don't ever seem to meet what we think they're going to meet. My suggestion is looking at maybe a run line where we take the previous year's actual collections and use that as a baseline, or smooth them out using something where we're not projecting the sales, growth in our revenue. Because it's such a hit or miss deal, it's probably as close to zero baseline budgeting as we're going to get, but we seem to set up a trap where the first couple of years of the sales tax, we budgeted 2.5% growth, and we got half of that. And so trying to smooth that out, and if you look at what we did actual last year, unless we hit a recession or some other deal, we know what last year's collections are, and maybe that, what are you looking at as far as your
Well, I mean, last
how you're going to
year,
project revenue?
last year, our year-end growth for 2018 was right at 1%. We built this budget based on an assumption of 1.5% for 2019. Currently, we are exceeding that projection. There's one piece of that I am kind of reserving to the side that I've mentioned to you all in the last few sales tax memos. We had a large increase in May that was attributed to one particular category that was very unusual for us. And the state has advised that this could be something that is potentially subject to a rebate, could have been a result of amended tax returns filed by, a company involved. It was in the area of electric goods wholesale. And that's so that's something that, again, because businesses have a full year to claim a rebate, that could come anytime between now and May 2020. So that piece I definitely don't want to forecast as though it might be ongoing due to taxpayer confidentiality rules. We are not allowed to know anything else other than the category of electric goods wholesale. So those are the types of things that we're watching. We are being conservative. Sometimes we're accused of being too conservative. But we did not, I don't think, set anything too lofty in 2019, and I certainly don't plan to get out on a limb for 2020 either.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Hines. Any more questions? Director Adcock?
Yes, Sarah.
This is, and before we start, this is a discussion, so our budget is very important. That's the reason why we're having these discussions. I want to make sure questions are being asked. Director Adcock?
Sarah, are there any revenues that we're looking at increasing, permits or?
We updated our permit fees at the beginning of 2019, and so right now I'm not aware of any plans to adjust those further in 2020. As we've already discussed, we are looking at adjusting our waste disposal rates. Scott is reaching out, and he always does. Scott's the Treasury Manager. Scott Messinelli is reaching out to the various departments on charges for services at the various venues to see if there are any plans for adjustments. And that's part of what we're beginning to do. But right now, I'm not aware yet of any plans for rate increases.
Could we look at other cities and see if they have some areas that they are having a revenue stream that we do not have?
We do compare that with our peers, particularly through the Arkansas Government Finance Officers Association and the Government Finance Officers. I would say our revenue sources are typical of most governments, the mix of sources. We get inquiries from other places in Arkansas on franchise fees and various things like that, but state law sets limits on those. We look to our utilities for guidance on their rate adjustments. There was an article either in today's paper or yesterday where Energy is, pursuing an increase. And so we never will build into the budget something that is still pending approval. We only build it into the budget if it has been approved by the Public Service Commission. The issue that we had in 2018 was that the rate increases had been approved by the Public Service Commission, and then when the Tax Cut and Jobs Act passed, that created income tax refunds that then the governor directed them to go back, review rates, and provide some credits.
Seems like that we have a lot more telephone companies, cell phone companies and everything. Are we billing each one of those?
We do receive income from all of the telephone and cell phone companies. Now, we do not receive franchise fees on wireless services because that is typically for using the city's right-of-way. And so if they're not having to go into the ground, if it's something in the air, then we don't charge a franchise fee on
Well, I
that.
know Verizon is going through lots of the neighborhoods, putting in new optic.
And fiber is one of the categories that we do collect on.
How much are we collecting off of those? I'd like to see the amount, because I know in Ellendale, they are really complaining about all the damage they're doing to the yards and everything. And Mr. Honeywell was going to send some of his people out to check on that.
Okay, I don't have that off the top of my head,
We'll
but I can
include
get
that,
you a
yeah.
franchise fee breakdown.
Okay, thank you. And also, we hear that from one of the directors up here that we're not following through with all of our PIT obligations. I would like to look over the last 5 years of how much money we have actually put into PIT. And is reentry in with PIT?
Reentry's funded in a couple of places. It's funded partially by Public Works and by community programs. Public Works funds the right-of-way reentry and sidewalks.
Okay, I'd like to know how much in the last 5 years we've put into PIT. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. And we'll have that information, if not before the September 10th presentation, we'll try to get that emailed to you or presented to you. Director Compuris.
Sir, let me make sure I understand. We're not going to go through our share and tell this year, right?
We're not going to do the program inventory sessions, right?
So we're not going to sit there and have the department say, I need this and I need $20 million, and we say, thank you for your.
Yeah, but I do want to say, because I heard Director Adcock say that last time too, that we ask for things that we know we can't get. But that's really where we've built our short-term financing need requests and looked at, is this something that can be funded by the 3/8 cent sales tax? Is this need something we need to, try to pursue a grant? So we have established some of our priorities from those sessions in the past, and I think done a good job of communicating to the board of actually what happens in each department at a more detailed level. But no, we're not going to do I need $20 million for new zoo, exhibits and things like that.
So how are we going to get an idea of each department's individual needs, their budgets, and how are we going to make an assessment of what y'all are saying if we want to change it? In the past, what we get is we meet, we hear the numbers, then we get a budget that says A, B, C, D, all the way through number. But to go through and try to decipher that number and say, do I think that this one's too high or too low, is basically impossible. So what sort of mechanism are you going to do to allow us to understand what y'all are doing if you really want to try to pass a budget by Thanksgiving?
Well, as I mentioned, we do plan on having multiple sessions so that we can discuss these things.
And Sarah, I'll step in.
Okay.
And so Director Computers, you should know this new approach has been instigated by myself. One, because when we had the budget amendment process, One of the glaring things that was shared is that this particular board felt like in years past that you didn't always receive as much information as possible. So number one, we're going to start early in discussing that. Two, one of the things we're not going to do the program evaluation processes. I think we have to, again, discuss what's aspirational as to what we want to see from a budgetary standpoint. That's being asked right now of each of the department directors, what's necessity. And so as we take those aspirational goals and then what's necessity, that will help build the project. And so thirdly, moving from that, our budget starts from our budget amendment. So our budget amendment serves as the foundation of how we build the 2020 budget. And so from that standpoint, so if there are any questions about the 2019 budget amendment, we definitely, let's start building those questions in now, because that's going to help inform how we develop the 2020 budget, in addition to being based on the aspirational goals of the department directors of what they are hearing from the community and our customers as we continue to lead this city. And then secondly, on the necessity of things that we have to do, that we must do. And that will determine that. Moving from that, and again, so on September 10th, it's going to be largely educational. So a lot of the questions that you're talking about, so on September 10th, this initial presentation is going to discuss the past. It's going to discuss the 2019 budget amendment. It's going to discuss hopefully the first two, well, definitely the first two quarters, but hopefully quarter three. But Sarah's looking at, it may not be quarter three, but definitely quarter two. But we'll definitely have quarters 1 and 2, so there are questions that can be asked from that standpoint. And then kind of how we're projecting the future. From that point on, we'll then have these what we call strategy sessions with the public.
Well, and that's all fine and good, but my point is, I never get individual information about the planning department. So if I have a question, do I call Jamie up and say, I want to come down and talk to you about your department?
No, you would call Sarah, myself, and Bruce, because we'll be the ones preparing that budget.
Well, I know, but if I want information about what he's doing, who do I call?
You would call those who are preparing the budget. But you can always, you as a city director, you can always call Jamie, but just sharing with you on how we're building the budget, you would talk to those who are preparing the budget.
So I can, if I want to, call
Yes.
a department head and say, this is what I think you need to be doing, this is what possibility.
You can share it, yes, you can share whatever you would like with a department director, but what we're sharing with you to be productive, it may be in the best interest to visit with those who are preparing the budget. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've spent a lot of time this year talking about parks, and in some of these discussions, we've looked at other cities that are ranked as some of the top cities for parks in the country, that have bigger populations than our city, but that have sometimes smaller acreage than we do in terms of parks. And we've got some task forces working on parks, and we've got all kinds of great things going on as we discuss some parks. And a couple of months ago, I think it was John said that the strategic planning document was just about finished. And so I wonder when we will get a presentation on that, because it seems like that would be very helpful in looking at the budget for next year to know what that's about.
Yes, we'll work with Mr. Eckert to see if we can expedite that presentation.
Thank you.
Director Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. What I would like to find out about is with regards to the budget is if there would be any improvement in the money that we pay for our code enforcement officers. As you can see by the meeting that we just had, that's a major issue. don't know if I'm fully staffed. I know they come and go because the rate of pay is so low. But I'm also down a neighborhood resource officer out in Ward 6. There's nobody that, say, in the past, I would have been able to refer Ms. Roberts and Ms. Reverend Gilbert to our neighborhood resource officer to schedule meetings or to make sure that they got informed on things, and that resource is not available to me now. So that's pretty much just people in and out. There's nobody there to talk with the public, so if they go in there, there's not anybody really there. So I'm trying to see if there would be any room in this 2020 budget to ensure that that position is staffed, and if our code enforcement officers could get a raise.
Thank you so much for that feedback. We'll include that in part of our budgetary discussions with Sarah, Bruce, and myself. As we that's a great example of what we are asking our department directors of aspirational things as well as necessities, and the goal is to find a balance between aspiration, necessity, and the dollars that we have available. Again. There was a reason why we had to have a budget amendment. We do have to keep that a focus, that we do our best to stay within the confines of the dollars that we have available. But we always have to consider an increase in revenue. I think we have to look at how do we, if there's availability to increase other revenues that we have right now in the city. And that always comes with a challenge, and then also long term. So that's a great example of something that's going to be a part of that budgetary process. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I really, really feel that we need to get some consistent staff out there, because as you could tell, you know, these individuals that we met with felt that they weren't being informed of meetings and things like that. And how do you do that? You know, we have the traditional methods. You know, we use our television station. You know, we use the radio station, we use the newspaper, but if people don't avail themselves of that, then at least we would have been able to say, well, you can get information at your neighborhood resource center. Well, now you can't.
Oh, I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director Hendricks.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, well, all of us, for really participating in this. And the thing that I admire most is that with you being a former banker, I trust that you know what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. Director Adcock.
Yes, one thing that we do, we love studies. We have the park plan that's coming up. We've got the master youth plan. And we also, about a year ago, did an extraterritorial study. And we have never had a final report on that study. And is there any thoughts of annexing any of this extraterritorial within the next year?
John, if we'll put that on our to-do list to discuss the ETJ study, and John and Jamie, I know, and let's just as a to-do list just to discuss, and we'll get some feedback back to Director Adcock.
Maybe in looking at the budget, maybe if we had brought in some of this extraterritorial, we would have more income coming into the city.
Thank you so much, Director Adcock. Director Peck.
Thank you, Mayor. This is kind of piggybacks off what Director Webb was talking about, and Director Adcock with the Parks Master Plan, and I think we've been waiting for bated breath on that one. But in preparing the budget for Parks and Recreation, without having a concrete plan yet, you know, I think the task force has met a couple of times, and we should have something maybe in December. Is that right, or later this year for the reimagining and so how? Because we have to prepare the budget before then, and War Memorial and Heinemann exist, I know we're cutting grass and things like that. How do we budget, or how do we figure in what's going to happen next year, since we don't really know what's going to happen in those parks?
Right. What we have to do is make certain that all the trains run on time. That's number one. We already currently doing programmatic functions at the War Memorial Park as well as Hyman Park. And I think if anyone goes out there on the weekends now, you're starting to see that there's some disc golf already been put in place at Hyman Park. There's now yoga, community runs, different things that are going on organically because the city is beginning to utilize this new green space in critical areas of our city. As it relates to the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force, they have been charged, one, to continue to get community feedback for those two particular parks, as well as any feedback on our 68 parks that we have in our city. But so to answer that one part of that question is that's part of the things that we are looking at within parks and recreation with our consultant that's doing the programmatic study. So they're looking through things from a financial standpoint. I would say the R3 Little Rock Parks Task Force have been charged to discuss the community's concerns and issues of what they would like to see for those two parks, and then two, identifying funding. It was shared early on within that Parks Task Force that one, because we did have to cut some things within the Parks Task Force within the budget amendment, that this task force would have to find new funding, and new funding would either come from, not necessarily from the budget, but the new funding would come from public-private partnerships and or some type of a sales tax initiative. So that's what they'll share. And they'll come back and they'll review what they would like to see and how much it would cost, and then it'll be on us as political leaders to identify whether to do a public-private partnership for those two parks as well as a sales tax initiative for those two parks. And so that's why we're able to hopefully pass this budget in November with understanding that new funding will have to go towards those two critical areas, whether through a public-private partnership or a sales tax initiative.
Okay, excuse me, that answers that question, and this is not policy, but I meant to mention this earlier. If everybody will put November the 16th on their calendar, we just met with a group yesterday about having a community event to clean up parks in all wards. We're going to pick 2 or 3. And we're involving the Adopt a Street people, the Animal Village people, and really have a big community effort because there's been so much input and feedback about how much people care about our parks. So I hope that all of you all can participate. And this was just birthed a couple of days ago, so there'll be more information. But that's not a football game on a Saturday. It's nothing to compete with that.
Very, very smart idea. Well, thank you so much, Director Peck. Director Hines.
Yes, Mayor, since one of the things is our biggest expense in our budget is, of course, public safety. And I know we've got a relatively new fire chief and a brand spanking new police chief. Are we going to be getting any information reports on them? I would imagine that our new police chief's probably determining what the right size force he needs for patrolmen, that type stuff. Are we going to be getting that information to figure into the budgeting process? As I know that the fire department is mainly driven on apparatus and staffing new firehouse. So just how are we going to be getting info on those two items as far as public safety goes?
Those two directors are part of our department directors, and so they'll be submitting to us their aspirational goals and their necessities like the other departments, and so that'll be a part of the budgeting process. Did that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Director Webb.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the policy/budget questions, or two of them, that I have had are about liens and about how to turn vacant lots, weed lots, and things into productive housing more quickly. And I know it's something that Director Hendricks talks about a lot, making those productive, tax-generating entities rather than a blight and a public safety issue in the community. And so, I know that there are different schools of thought on liens and whether or not it's productive. and there's also some misunderstanding, and I think I don't have a complete understanding of how we go about pursuing some liens. But when we get to the budget, I hope we can incorporate a discussion about that. There was a big article in the Arkansas Business about 6 or 8 weeks ago about this, and some of the folks from North Little Rock city government were quoted in this article, so that's kind of one piece of it. But the second is how we can turn, what we can do to more quickly assist folks in turning these blighted properties into positive places for people to live and improving the neighborhood. So I don't know if we have enough time in some of these budget discussions to talk about the different ways to come up with what all the current policies are, and are the restrictions based on state law. But those are two policy/budget things that I hope we can pursue this fall.
Yes, ma'am, and thank you so much for that. Bruce and I have asked our city attorney to look at, really based on a lot of what you're talking about, to look at determining housing to be considered a public use, and if housing is considered as a public use, you can speak, because I know you're trying to say it a little bit better than me.
Public purpose.
Public purpose, not a public use. You're right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I couldn't read your lips, Bruce. But as a public purpose, and so our city attorney is looking through that, and in the event that we're able to determine that to be a legal use and a public purpose, it may help present some more creative ways on how we address housing in the city of Little Rock. So that's one thing that's underway that our city attorney is reviewing, and we should have something by September 3rd, I believe he shared with us today during our policy meeting. And so that should be a starting place from that standpoint. And secondly, I know that Bruce and Victor Turner have been focused on some of those same issues from the housing perspective. But we'll be sure to include a discussion in this budget preparation process about that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Wright?
Yes, Mayor, I would also like for you and the manager and Ms. Lanahan to look at an allocation of funding for our senior citizens. You know, all of that is in parks, and when we began to set up the Age-Friendly Communities Commission, we pretty much determined that they don't have a budget, because the budget that was allocated for them mainly was for salary, and there was really nothing in there for them. And so going forward, I would like for us to always include some type of allocation for our seniors.
Thank you so much. We'll add that as a consideration part of the budget.
And also, too, a pot of funding that is eligible, seniors are eligible for, is CDBG. And I know you have to be 62 and low to moderate income, but that is, a lot of them are covered in this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Hendricks?
I wanted to share something about housing, the vacant housing that we have in vacant lots. And we will let you know when we will be having our first meeting with Alex Benton. But one of the things that I would love to see, and it's something that I have experienced with HUD, is that the vacant properties that we have, we need to set up an auction, and we can auction those houses off. And I know it works because I was a part of it with HUD.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. Director Fordson?
Thank you, Mayor. You mentioned two of the big factors that will influence this year's budget, the 25% increase in our jail assessment, as well as the unknown of health care costs. In the past, one other thing that has been one of the big swing factors in putting together a final budget is the vacancy savings number. And according to my current memory, I think one of the biggest portions of that has been in the police department, and that vacancy number is now reduced substantially. And I guess Sarah or Mayor Bruce, Does that mean that with our current personnel census and everything, that cushion factor may no longer be the factor it has been in the past as we put this budget together?
Sarah, can you speak to that for us, please?
Well, you're right that that number has been dropping. Back before the sales tax election, and I think the vacancy savings had reached, the $8 million range. The budget has dropped by about $1 million in the last couple of years. Each year, we got it down to 7 and then 6.5, and the 2019 budget included a $5.5 million reduction associated with vacancy savings. And again, I want to make sure that everybody understands exactly what that is. That's looking at our personnel budget. It's looking at the time it takes to fill positions as they turn over. Certainly, there have been some that we didn't intend to fill immediately that were kind of held back because of budget constraints. Public safety, we've almost always said those are available to fill. It just has taken a long time to work our way down to where I think with this last recruit class, we're actually fully staffed. From a standpoint of uniform positions. Now, the chief would disagree because they're not all deployed, but we're paying all of the authorized positions currently. So, yes, when I look at vacancy savings, I'm looking at the number of positions that are vacant, the estimated time it does take to fill as police and fire retire, roll off, and another recruit class comes on, and that number is declining.
But there has been, I think, in the past, a certain amount of predictability about trends in that area. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Director Fortson. That's some good feedback. Before I proceed with some final comments, Emily, I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if you could just give a very brief update about our performance audit firm or program audit firm, just so the board's aware what's going on.
Mayor, members of the board, McConnell and Jones is reviewing several of our city departments and the programs within them, especially those programs that are public facing. And they are here visiting. Today they met with the mayor and the city manager, and they're also meeting with department directors and staff this week. So,
Can you share the specific departments?
yes. Housing and neighborhood programs, parks and recreation, the building services division of Public Works, housing, the zoo, community programs,
I think
planning.
Planning.
That's 6.
Yeah.
Yes.
So planning and development, the Little Rock Zoo, community programs, housing, neighborhood programs, the building services division of Public Works.
Yes.
Do we know their measurement? Their measurement criteria is pretty, from a accounting standpoint. They're going to be looking at dollars and human capital, and to figuring out, one, the balance between a return on investment and return on effectiveness. And so many times we may be expending dollars in a particular area, but how effective are we being with those dollars? And so they'll provide feedback and recommendations to Sarah, Bruce, and myself as we kind of build the budget as well. But we have to take a laser look at our budget of our some $210 to $208 million when you combine all the funds together, on how do we address our city's priorities, number one, but the balance of having aspirations for greater within the confines of being fiscally conservative and prudent. We're going to have some outside lenses look at it from an accounting standpoint to make certain that we're being fiscally conservative, as well as from an effectiveness standpoint. Well, yeah, I can't speak to it at this point in time, but we'll make certain that there's some type of a presentation before we take any recommendations as well. Yes, ma'am. But just wanted to give you all an update. Director Adcock. Thank you, Emily.
Yes, I would like more information about this McConnell and Jones. Was that a bid that we put out? And what is the focus of the bid?
Sure. And again, but before Emily, this is something we shared with you all during the budget amendment process.
It was part of an RFQ process, and I'd be happy to share that with you. I don't have it on hand right now.
RFQ?
Yes,
How many responders did we have?
I can't answer that off the top of my head, but I'll find out.
I'd like to have information about and what the cost of it was,
Sure.
and where this company is located, this McConnell and Jones. Is it a local company? Is it out of state,
They're in Texas.
Texas? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to have more information about the RFQ, please.
Okay, I'll get that to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, do you have anything that you would like to discuss or add? Seeing none. Again, I want to also just kind of to readdress, I know Director Compuris asked some certain questions. I want to make certain that we understand. Again, I can't speak to the past on how things were done with the budgeting process. We want to focus on the present as we build towards our future. And with that being said, that's the reason why we're doing something different. We're starting early to discuss the budget, being this first discussion, but we'll have the initial presentation on September the 10th. Again, it's our job to prepare the budget, and it's the board's job to pass a budget with, of course, their thoughts on how we utilize our citizens' dollars and our city's dollars. Mr. Moore, did you, as we utilize our city's dollars together and effectuating this policy from a budget perspective. And so I think if we all commit, and one, before we move on, I want to make certain that we got everything addressed, and I really appreciate these questions because this will be very helpful part of the budgeting process. What I have from Director Adcock is that she would like to have some information in regards to franchise fee breakdown of the last 5 years, the PIT breakdown last 5 years, an update on our ETJ study. Director Webb would like to have a presentation about weed lots, blights, and housing as a part of the discussion process, and an update on our Parks Master Plan that was both directed from Director Webb and Peck. Director Wright would like to some type of focus within the budgeting process on code enforcement funding and having consistent staff there, as well as a senior citizen allocation. And Director Hendricks wants us to look into the processes of a vacant property auction as well. Director Fortson wants to keep a keen eye on our vacancy savings number, and we'll try to get an update on where we are from that standpoint. I think that's all of the. And Director Hines wants us to be conservative. We will be. We won't have to worry about that. I promise you that. Yes, ma'am.
Don't know if it would be a budgetary thing, but I would like to see our procurement department developing marketplace for small and minority businesses so that we can be more consistent as far as developing these people as contractors and keeping like our weed lots on the cut and demolitions and a streamlined process like we were hearing from the young lady about, the dumping fees and all the, and I don't know if we have enough staff for that, so that may be a budget consideration.
Yes, ma'am. So thank you so much. So those are a lot of things that we're going to take as we get ready for our September 10th initial presentation and continue to build on for our forthcoming budget strategy sessions as we build this budget and create more community engagement with the budget process. Again, we ask that the board members, as you share with these questions and concerns, please share those concerns with myself, Sarah, and Bruce as we're working as a team to prepare this budget for the city board to consider for passage. So we ask that you would help from that standpoint. And then secondly, one of the things that we do want to keep in mind when we discuss allocations here and allocations there, and when that's new money, when we're dealing with a budget, either we increase fees, we find new funding resources, or we subtract. So I want to keep that in mind as we're asking to consider certain things that there may need to be a need to look for other revenue sources as we continue to lead the city and be fiscally conservative. Yes, Director Hendricks.
I really wanted to ask, is it possible where something can be set aside, it have to be in an ordinance where minorities can participate in all of this money that the city gives to Caucasian contractors? I don't like it at all.
Well, first, I know there's been a lot of discussion as of late, historically, in regards to the city's procurement processes. One I would share after doing some research is that we've come a long way, and we want to give some good kudos to Abdul, who's gotten us to where we are today. So we have experienced a lot of progress. There's always room for improvement. I think Abdul will share that with you as well as with Sarah. And so one of the things that we're looking into is how do we reimagine how we do procurement from that standpoint. I think secondly, too, Bruce and I have been discussing, again, it's part of the budgeting process that there may be a need to do a disparate impact study, but a disparate impact study costs money. And that's a part of the budgeting process. Again, that's a part of priorities. We're working together to figure out, budget is reflective of our city's priorities. And so we're going to take some hard look at some things on what's a priority, what's aspirational, and what's necessity, and find somewhere in the middle is going to be the balance for our 2020 budget, and as we look at things for the short term and the long term.
And I say that because you mentioned about priorities, but I love to talk about race when you look at the makeup of this city, the racial makeup of this city.
And that would go into the disparate impact study. Seeing no other questions, is there a motion to adjourn? All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Motion to adjourn.